Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
Fixed. My secret life as a match fixer has been described as exposing a dark and corrupt underworld in British football. In 2012, English football was rocked by the biggest match fixing operation to hit the shores in the modern era. One man at the centre of it was the player Moses Swaibu, and I'm delighted to say that live from Switzerland, I believe, he joins us to tell us more about this fascinating book. Good morning to you, Moses.
Hi, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, my friend. And just what do you? Can I ask what you're doing in Switzerland? Just enjoying some alpine air?
Oh, I was. I haven't had a day off for the last 5 years, so when I do, I'm sure to let you and your listeners know. But I'm actually in Switzerland with the Olympic Committee. There's currently an athletes forum happening here around match manipulation and how to deal with the problems, leading up until the 2028 LA Games.
Yeah.
In addition to that, it's a 2-day conference with a new president-elect and every athlete across the world who represents different countries and variations of their committees. So it's a very important conference. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak about the book.
Yep. So tell me a little bit about your background, because you're from South London, Croydon area, signed with Crystal Palace. I mean, just talk me through the sort of your career and how you got to where you are.
Yeah. So I'm 36 years old. I grew up in the heart of South East London. I actually got into Crystal Palace at 16 years old. I was the last person to be signed. In addition to that, I'd gone from playing football in the streets of South London to playing with first-team players and people I used to watch on TV. Within a year and a half, I'd gone from signing to Palace, then making my professional debut in a friendly against Everton. So my career was very much on its way to potentially becoming a Premier League player when I was 18.
Because you were Young Player of the Year. You got 2 awards in the Crystal Palace sort of end of year awards. Is that correct?
Yeah, strangely enough, I was very fortunate enough to play with young Johnny Bostock, who was wanted by every club in the world at the time, and a dear friend of mine, Victor Moses, who went on and won everything in football. So whilst I was sitting on the table with them, Sam Gordon was the chairman at the time. I'd been called up for both the Young Player of the Year Awards, Vice President's Award, and Scholar of the Year. So it was quite a surreal moment, to be honest. I think at that time it just showed the level of dedication and application I put to the game. For me, football, because of where I was coming from, if you understand the demographic and detail of how the concrete jungles and cages in South London were built and that foundation, football was life and death for a lot of my peers and my generation.
Because that's an interesting one, Mo. That's a very interesting comment to make, because it is. Some people say it is a way out. It is an alternative to what people are seeing in South London at the moment. Everything was looking really good. And then the manager changed, and there are so many. This is the thing about professional sport. There are so many what ifs and reasons, and those players who've got, like yourself, glittering futures, and then a small quirk in the matrix, and suddenly you find yourself out of favour. Yeah,
but you know what? I think it's the other way to look at it. Again, it isn't just South London. If you look at places like Brazil and Africa in particular, a lot of people who come from my background and literally play sport as a whole look for hope. So for me, I didn't really have an academy journey in regards to development. So being released and being told, go and find another club, was almost as good to me as having a professional contract. And the reason why I say that, you grow up with so many challenges. Just being there and living a dream is actually positive. In a naive way, because of my education into football, being released made me work even harder. So not only with Neil Warnock, but the managers I had at that time, I just knew I need to get better. And obviously what I learned at Crystal Palace allowed me to drop down a level to come back up to Lincoln City, which is where I was actually first approached for match fixing when I was 19.
I mean, you're 19, you're sort of vulnerable. I mean, again, a sports person's career can be extremely quick. I mean, a bad tackle could be the end of everything that you've trained for. You found, you had personal circumstances. Your girlfriend, I think you were expecting your first child as well. So, I suppose you could say you were sort of targeted because you were kind of vulnerable at that point.
I think rather than me look at it as I was vulnerable, football was very vulnerable at that time. Reason being, in respect to match fixing and vulnerabilities, players who are underpaid, who are young and impressionable, coming from all walks of the globe, trying to play football, don't have the right education and fundamental tools that was required at that time. So I wasn't only the first player that was approached. There was various other players that either looked like me or had similar backgrounds that were being approached. Obviously, you don't go into sport thinking you're most decorated player in a team, let alone the captain and the player who's played in the Premier League actually introduces you to a bunch of criminals. So what I'd left in South London and the environment, some friends passing away and dealing with, some real life traumatic experiences. Yeah. I was never going to turn around to Chris Sutton at the time and tell him, hey, by the way, Gaffer, we've been approached by a match fix. I didn't even know what match fixing was. Bearing in mind, betting and gambling, I'd never been into the bookies or placed the bet. So at that time, betting sponsorship weren't what it was, from my memory, being young. So the vulnerabilities were really subtle forms of grooming, as I mentioned in my book. And if you look at these places all across the world, and in particular, when you don't have the best family foundation, grooming just isn't physical. It could be mental. Yeah. It's done over a period of time, hence why in wider society, gangs are formed, or groups of young men growing up in these communities get together and no one really knows how to talk or communicate. And that's what the vulnerability for me was at that time, because I'd gone to football from 9 years old. My mum and dad never come to watch me play, apart from my brother and sister on the odd occasion. But back then, there weren't no one-to-one training or coaches and what football has now. So all of my development, I was making decisions as a grown man from when I was 10 years old.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that because we do cocoon football. I mean, more than perhaps any other sport. You're picked from the age of 8. You're taken out of, if you like, normal life, and unless you've got, figure. I mean, okay, now it's different, but we're talking, a different age, and you are literally taken away from the real world and cocooned, and it's all on the result. It's all on the, how good the playing is. And so there's nobody, if you like, to give you a rock and an anchor. Is that a fair thing to say, Moses? To
an extent, yeah. Yeah. I think if I really go back before I was anything, because I played football, I'm also a human being like everybody else in the world. I was a fan of the game and sport, and more importantly, when you think about it from the fans' perspective, we have this ideology where we think football is what we see, and sport. If you look at the way sport is, we rarely focus on anything outside of that 1%. You look at the World Cup, the Champions League, the Premier League, that's what we see on TV, and that's where the majority of money is generated. But then there's a lost space within sport, and football in particular, where there's a flip side of the game, unless you've actually played and been in it and had my experiences. So the game I saw, being a young boy coming into football and a professional, wasn't the game I saw when match fixing and the decisions I made me love football in one respect, but also hate at the same time. Before I was even arrested, I had to leave the syndicate and almost remind myself why I played this game, because I actually hated football, if I'm going to be brutally honest with you. A month and a half before I was arrested, I couldn't physically go on a pitch because of A, the actions I took, and B, the guilt from having to watch my teammates and hearing fans call out what they believed was suspicious games. So the last club I played for was at Whitehawk. I walked off the pitch and I was like, I don't think I'll ever play football again. Match fixing always poked this dark head round the corner where, even though I tried to get out, once you understand the organised crime and greed and money and addiction, it's very strange how things can pull you back in. And when we look at gambling and betting addiction, it isn't just fans that are affected, it's also players as well. So times have changed now. The right things are being put in place, but more importantly, the book I've written over the last 10 years with this publication today, I really wanted to give not only fans and people in the industry an insight into a world that exists. We're not going to bury our head in the sands and pretend nothing and this isn't going on. You know, the world's evolving and we should be moving with the times rather than going against it.
It's interesting. I mean, you were literally approached by, characters, seem like characters out of a Guy Ritchie movie, Russians with, and this is like a couple of years ago, with, bundles of cash. I mean, there's one thing you say was, the cash came up to your knees or your waist or something. And for a young man, that's a very sort of seductive prospect, isn't it?
Yeah, you know what, though? I think, when you grow up and you watch these movies, or obviously everyone watches some form of shows and documentaries, your version of what you think money is, especially in the wrong way, is actually the opposite. I think when you're so pure in the beginning and the guilt and pressure almost eats away at your soul, the money becomes nothing because it makes you very numb. So I always thought if I played football, I didn't really think about money because as an apprentice, what was we earning? £100? Mm-hmm. In my professional career, I didn't make millions, but I still made a decent amount for me to maintain and put a roof over my head and food in my belly because it was the sport we loved. When the money got to what it got to, and again, when money came up to my torso, it made me tell myself I couldn't even spend it, to be honest. The things I thought I could do with it was actually the opposite because that's where the control comes into it. So whether it was £100,000 or £1 million, I actually had a negative effect with that for all of the wrong reasons. And that made me paranoid. It made me depressed. It put my life at risk. It put people around me's life at risk, depending on what the next outcome would have been. And that feeling as a young man wasn't what I was used to, let alone I didn't earn that money, I cheated. I was part of the system, but even though I can take accountability, the world is much more bigger than I am. I don't control this $1 trillion industry globally. I was a very much small pawn at that time for me not understanding and realizing I was just being used like many other people. All they did was make me feel very important up until the time I was surplus to requirement.
You mentioned that, you'd fallen out of love. You didn't like football anymore. So in a kind of way, was it almost a relief? I'm not done, when you got the knock on the door and this was all exposed? Because
not really. If you look at the way the book started, I started the book at the end, and the book's kind of ended at the beginning of a new life. Part of the hardest process for me was after Bromley, there was no law enforcement in sight. I think for those that have heard the podcast, if I wasn't arrested that day, I'd have never been caught. My next decision, if I didn't have my daughter, I was on a one-way ticket to Singapore to expand this globally. So what I remember and realise is I actually tried to fall back in love with football. I'd gone to Whitehawk, then I'd gone to Sutton. And at that time, it wasn't for any financial reasons because I had all the money in the world. I wanted to love the game and just be free and play again. However, because of the guilt and what I'd done in that period, even at the end of match fixing, I couldn't look my teammates in the eye. I didn't want to address the fans, I'd almost gone against everything I believed in, and I wanted to have that feeling again, just to have that. Athletes will probably understand this a bit more, but once you play at a decent level, you're always going to miss that changing room and those moments. But my memory was blurred because of the decisions I made. So I went to Sutton for 2 weeks, couldn't find that flame. I went to Whitehawk and I was like, I don't want to be on this pitch. I got to a stage where I wasn't involved in match fixing, but people still were. And me knowing that, I had two choices. I've made all the money I could imagine, but then again, other people may very much still be at the start of their match fixing journey. And I was like, I don't want to be a part of that no more. So how do I come out of this criminal organisation without having a network? And again, because of who I went to prison with and me spending time with someone I once looked up to like a big brother, it just made me think, how can I make a change and positively affect other people that may make the decisions I did? You served your time, and it would have been very easy for you just to sort of like disappear into the background.
but you built yourself back up again. You decided to make a positive change. How difficult is that? I mean, obviously you had time to think over the actions, but to come back and then be in the position which you are today. I speak to you as you are. You are obviously very involved with campaigning against this. So the hard steps, I would say, Moses. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say I come from a very unique place in the world. I think once you've hit the heights that I once did and the lowest depths of being locked up, and I don't think there's any place in the world that's lower than being in jail and being locked up for 23 hours, I'm reminded of what South London and the place I come from and that community, which is what I believe sport is. You know, I'm very much a person that's always been on the ground, and more importantly, as the world evolves, young people and the younger generation need this more than ever. So the first question I asked myself when I was in prison, how would I feel if my young daughter and kids and family members went into sport, and again, because of live betting markets, people are able to bet on under 16s and under 18 sports globally. And that didn't really sit well with me, and I had to remind myself the power of impact and social impact is far greater than any type of fear, because I've never really been scared of the decisions I'm making since prison and creating the right campaign and awareness. With the company I had, Game Changer 360, and the reasons why I'm currently doing a lot of the work with the likes of FIFA and the Olympic Committee on a worldwide scale. Again, the problem stems far beyond the UK, and it shows you're now dealing with countries and governments who have the same position, but they don't have the right tools and resources in countries where players are being dragged off coaches. You know, match fixers are putting actors onto the field of play and creating betting markets, and no one really understands how illegal gambling works. And once you understand the journey and the people that I've connected to, whether that may be characters in the book or the podcast, this is real life, you know. These are real people and they're still alive. And fortunately for me, I wasn't killed. I was threatened, but more importantly, I walk with God, and the only person you should fear is the man above. You know, if I can affect the way someone may change or think, even if it's one person can affect two people, two can affect 10. And the more positive change that happens, we need to take a top-down, bottom-up approach. You know, we also need to educate those at the highest level, which is what I believe I'm doing currently. And their mindsets are changing, and more importantly, a lot of where sport is now, they're actually doing the right things.
Was it a difficult one to write? I mean, you do the podcast.
Oh, man, listen. It's probably, I'll say, the hardest physical thing I've had to do. You know, from the start to finish, family don't even know the depth of what was in my mind. Fortunate enough for me, even though I wasn't academic, I was very good at English in school, so I loved reading. Prison changed the way I developed in regards to going to therapy, continuing that when I came outside and really understanding myself. I think before you love anyone, one must love themselves within and work on their emotional, physical, and mental state, especially with young men in this society. It was also important for me to understand the reasons as to why things happen. So I talk about a best friend that was stabbed 20 times in London, and because I had football, that sugarcoated all of the pain I was going through, because I could take that anger out on the pitch. But then again, you can only play for 90 minutes and you only train for 2 hours a day. So a lot of the book, I had to go and visit places again and speak to people and find the reasons as to why these things happened. You know, and it all comes down to one thing: self-education and self-love and environments in our community. If we have the right foundations, you know, we should be able to succeed in life. However, life has its vices and cults and things that will change that. But I'm a parent, I'm a son, brother, uncle, cousin. So I represent something much more than who I am. You know, this is going to be bigger than anything I could have imagined. And whilst I'm at the Olympic Committee looking over the lake in Lausanne, I'm a boy from Southeast London, you know. The dream is to inspire other individuals and make people aware that with the right provisions and things in place, you can make the right decisions. And more importantly, more people have actually done the right things than the wrong. Just to clarify and get that out there.
The book, is called Fixed, My Secret Life as a Match Fixer. You can order it via our own virtual bookstore, listeners. I urge you to it. Moses, if people want to find you online, I mean, do you have a website? Do you do social media? Where can people sort of engage in conversation?
People, please, for everyone that's listened to the podcast and book, it's an open dialogue and discussion, good or bad. I believe creating awareness is hearing people's thoughts, then providing clarity around what the facts are, also improving areas of what people don't know. I've been fortunate and privileged to be around probably the best experts you can find within this sector. You can find my name on social media, Moses Swaibu, Instagram. I'm still getting used to how to dealing with social media as I am a dinosaur at 36. My generation and the life I live is very much private and peaceful. So yeah, you can get the book on all platforms. I've also recorded an audio book. It's funny enough, I shouldn't say this, but I am.
Yep.
The audio book is, even I was surprised reading the book back. It doesn't really feel like it's myself, so not many people read. But if you don't read, you can hear the audio. And if you like the podcast, go and download the audio.
And what is the podcast called? Fixed as well? Both the same title. Brilliant. Well, listen, sorry. After you, sir.
Yeah, no, the audio recording was probably the hardest process. And again, when you write, it's very much different from reading out loud. So again, just following on from the podcast wasn't edited because the truth was in its rawest form. And sometimes if you really want to have a platform, you have to be unapologetically honest, hence the title.
Well, it's been absolutely outstanding to speak to you this morning. It's from the concrete jungles, as you say, the concrete cages of South London to where you are now, Moses. It's and congratulations on, as the Americans say, your journey, as it were. Have a great day today you're in Lausanne today, no?
Yes, I'm in Lausanne. 28 degrees. It's beautiful weather. I know you're over in Spain, but we have a lot of work to do. As much as I like to enjoy the city and the place. We have a conference in the next 2 hours, and it should be a really good experience.
Well, listen, thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. The book is called Fix. It's by Moses Swaibu. Moses, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you this morning.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to your listeners for tuning in.